I was sitting across from a friend last week. Let's call him Elias. He's 32, a senior software engineer, stays fit, and recently closed on his first apartment. By every traditional metric of the last century, Elias is a catch. But as he sat there, the blue light of his phone reflecting in his eyes with a kind of hollow, localized exhaustion, he showed me his dashboard. 300 swipes, 0 matches. Not just for the day, for the entire month. He wasn't even angry, he was just profoundly confused, like a man trying to plug a key into a lock that had been silently welded shut while he wasn't looking. He told me he'd been working on himself, buying the right clothes and refining his bio, operating under the old blue pill logic that if you provide value, the market responds. He thought he was just having a bad run. What Elias didn't realize, and what most people are still refusing to see, is that he isn't failing a social test. He's being crushed by a mathematical one. While the headlines are obsessed with inflation and stock market volatility, the 2026 World Inequality Report just quietly released a data point that is far more volatile for the fabric of our society. It's called the sexual Gini coefficient, and for the first time in recorded history, it has breached the 0.5 threshold. To put that in perspective, that's a level of disparity that usually triggers civil unrest in developing economies. We are no longer living in a world of dating. We're living in the state of digital feudalism, where a microscopic attention oligopoly at the top commands 90% of the market, leaving men like Elias, the digitally invisible, to navigate a resource deflation so brutal it has effectively ceased to exist for them. This isn't about bad luck or better photos anymore. It is a systemic collapse of the marriage contract, a hyperinflated expectation cycle, and a rigged game where the only way to win is to stop playing by the old rules entirely.
You know, hearing you read that out loud, it lands even harder. Dystopian.
It feels dystopian.
Yeah.
And honestly, seeing him, it looked dystopian. He didn't look like a guy who was just, unlucky. He looked like someone who'd been erased.
Yeah. Like we're talking about a famine or some kind of resource war, not just people trying to find a date for Friday night.
Exactly. But before we get too deep into that, I want to back up for a second. We just threw a lot of big terms out there. Digital feudalism, sexual Gini coefficient.
Right.
We've got a massive stack of research here. Stuff from economic journals, algorithmic audits from Fairmatch, behavioral studies. And I think our mission today is to really dig in and figure out, is my friend Elias just having a bad run? Or is the math actually truly broken?
The math is definitely that broken. And, the sources we're diving into today, they aren't just opinion pieces or blog posts. We're looking at peer-reviewed papers, algorithmic audits. This is the hard science of why modern dating feels so impossible for so many people.
Okay, so let's get right into it then. I want to start with a story from our research that I think really, it just perfectly sets the stage for this first part of the problem. It's about a guy, we'll call him Arthur. He's in London. And I really want you to just picture this scene, because it's happening in millions of apartments probably right now. Arthur is what the data calls a digitally invisible man. He's educated, has a decent job, he's a good guy. If this were 1995, Arthur would probably be married with a kid on the way.
Sure, he'd be a great catch.
But it's not 1995. So he's sitting there in his quiet flat, and his entire romantic life is just happening through a screen. He swipes, he sends out messages into the void, and gets absolutely nothing back. Just silence. He described it in a forum post as feeling like a ghost in the machine.
And that phrase, ghost in the machine, is just incredibly accurate. From a purely technical standpoint, that's what he is.
But see, my first reaction is maybe he just has a bad profile. Or he's very charming. I mean, we've all seen terrible profiles, right?
Yeah.
That's the easy explanation.
It is the easy explanation. And that's the assumption everyone makes. We think the system is neutral, right? Like a mirror. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, you blame your own face. You don't blame the glass.
You get a better haircut.
Exactly. But what if the glass itself is warped? What if it's a funhouse mirror designed to show only a very specific reflection? We've got a master's thesis here from Copenhagen Business School that dives into this concept of network intensity. And this, I think, is the key to why Arthur is invisible.
Network intensity. Okay, that sounds like something from a physics class.
Yeah.
What on earth does that have to do with dating?
So think about a village in the 1800s, or, even just a local bar back in the 90s. The network intensity is really low. Okay. You walk in, you can see maybe 20, 30, 50 people at most. You can realistically compete with those 50 people. If you're the funniest guy in that specific bar on that specific night, you win. You have a real shot.
Right. I can work the room. I can read the vibe.
Exactly. But on a dating app, the network intensity is astronomical. It's off the charts. You are, in theory, connected to every single eligible person within a 50-mile radius all at once.
Instantly.
And the thesis argues that when you have a market with that level of intensity, it inevitably creates what's called a winner-take-all dynamic.
So wait, instead of being the funniest guy in the bar, I now have to be the funniest, most successful, best-looking guy in all of London.
Precisely. And not just the funniest. You have to be the tallest, the richest, the most photogenic. The market naturally drives toward a single dominant standard because everyone has access to the same pool. This is what we mean by the attention oligopoly.
So there's no room for the local champion anymore.
None. In a low-intensity network, you could be the best option available. In a high-intensity network, everyone is chasing the same global champion, the top 1% of the top 1%.
So from the second Arthur logs on, he's being mathematically compared to, like, a male model who also happens to be a neurosurgeon.
Worse. It actually gets much worse than that. This is where we need to bring in the fair match research paper. This is a really deep technical audit of how these recommendation algorithms actually function under the hood.
Okay.
And what they found was that 78%, almost 4 out of 5 of major dating platforms suffer from something called popularity bias.
Popularity bias. But if popular people get more likes, isn't that just how life works?
Yeah, but in an algorithm, it's not just a reflection of reality. It's a mathematical feedback loop. It works like compound interest, but for attention.
What do you mean by a feedback loop?
The paper explains it like this. The probability of a user, let's say, Arthur, being shown to a new person is directly proportional to the number of likes he has already received.
Great. Yeah. If I sign up for an app today and I don't get in the first hour, the algorithm just stops showing my profile to people.
It dramatically deprioritizes it. It creates this vicious rich get richer scenario. Think of it like a snowball rolling down a hill. If user A, the neurosurgeon male model, gets 10 likes in his first hour, the algorithm tags him as high-value inventory.
High-value inventory.
All right. And the algorithm's job is to keep users engaged on the app. It shows this high-value person to everyone.
Because seeing attractive people makes me want to keep swiping and stay on the app.
Correct. But now look at user B, our friend Arthur. Maybe he posted his profile on a Tuesday morning when engagement is low. He gets 0 likes in that first hour. The algorithm looks at his profile and says, low value inventory. And it effectively puts him at the bottom of the deck.
So he's basically been shadow banned just because he had a bad launch day.
Yes. The machine learns from historical user behavior and then it amplifies it exponentially. If you don't have initial momentum, you never get visibility. So Arthur isn't just failing to impress women, he's failing to even appear on their screens. He's a mathematically structurally invisible.
Terrifying.
Yes.
It's like walking into a party and having the bouncer immediately put a bag over your head before you've even had a chance to say hello to anyone.
And there's another layer to this. The report calls it algorithmic colonization. It's not just about ranking people from hot to not, it's also about segregation.
Segregation? What, like racial segregation?
Socioeconomic, racial, educational, attractiveness level, all of it. These apps almost all use a system called collaborative filtering.
Yeah, it's the Amazon thing, right?
Yeah.
People who bought a toaster also bought bread.
Yeah, it's people who liked user A also liked user B. The algorithm makes an assumption that people with similar profiles, similar backgrounds want the same things. So if you're a certain race or you have a certain income and people like you tend to only swipe on a specific demographic,
then the algorithm will lock you into only seeing that demographic.
Yeah. It locks you in. Even if you explicitly say in your preferences, I'm open to dating anyone, the algorithm might look at your data and say, no, actually, based on the behavior of users like you, you only belong in this pile.
So it creates these invisible walls, these filter bubbles.
It does. And the research shows that these apps inadvertently segregate the dating pool more deeply than real life ever did. In a bar, you might strike up a conversation with someone totally outside your demographic just because they happen to be sitting next to you. The app removes that possibility for serendipity. It reinforces social stratification.
It sounds like the algorithm is designed to be the ultimate conformist.
Right.
It just looks at what happened yesterday and makes sure that exact same thing happens again today, but more intensely.
That is literally the definition of how machine learning is trained. It predicts the future based on a biased past. And if the past was biased, the future becomes even more so.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here for a minute. Even if the algorithm is this rigged, this biased, Surely human behavior still plays a part. I mean, at the end of the day, we're the ones doing the swiping.
But the medium itself dramatically changes the behavior. We have a source here on the psychology of texting and interface design, and it talks about short-term versus long-term mating strategies.
Okay, this is the idea that we act differently if we're looking for a one-night stand versus a spouse, right?
Yes. But the key insight is that the app's interface forces everyone into a short-term mindset, whether they want to be or not. When you meet someone face-to-face, you process thousands of data points.
Sure.
Tone of voice, their smell, their body language, their sense of humor, how they treat the waiter. All those little cues are signals for long-term compatibility, for character.
Right. I might meet someone who isn't a 10 out of 10 physically, but they make me laugh and I feel safe and comfortable with them. And that becomes the most attractive thing.
Exactly. But on a phone screen, you have half a second. You have a two-dimensional image and maybe a witty bio. All those subtle, long-term cues are stripped away. You are forced to make a binary decision, left or right, based almost entirely on visual impulse and status markers.
So even if my conscious brain is thinking, I want to find a wife, my thumb is swiping as if I'm just looking for a hookup.
The interface engages your short-term mating psychology. It's primal. And in short-term mating, women are, from an evolutionary standpoint, hyper-selective about visual markers of genetic fitness and status.
Which explains the Pareto distribution we always hear about. The whole 80-20 rule.
On some of these apps, it's actually much more extreme than 80-20. The data suggests it's more like the top 5% of men are getting the vast majority of the female attention because the medium has stripped away everything else that makes a man valuable in a long-term context.
So Arthur, who might be this incredibly solid, loyal, funny, dependable partner, a fantastic long-term bet, is being judged solely on his short-term visual assets.
He's bringing a detailed resume to a beauty pageant, and he doesn't understand why he's losing.
God, that's just so bleak. It really does make you feel for the guy. He's just sitting there, his face glowing blue in the dark, wondering what on earth is wrong with him, when the reality is he's playing a game that was literally designed to make him lose.
He's the ghost in the machine, a rounding error in the algorithm.
Okay, so that's Arthur. Let's call it the supply side crisis. But what about the people who are getting the matches? Because I was reading through these threads and forums, and it's not like the so-called winners are all that happy either.
Oh.
Which brings me to Elena. This is the second narrative anchor. Elena's in Manhattan. She's 34. She's a VP at a marketing firm, makes great money. She's attractive, witty. By that old blue pill logic my friend Elias was using, she should be beating guys off with a stick.
In any traditional market, absolutely. She's a very high-value catch.
Right. But her reality is the complete opposite of Arthur's, but it's equally frustrating. She has matches. She has plenty of them. But she describes this feeling of expectation hyperinflation. She feels completely paralyzed.
The optimization trap, the paradox of choice.
She goes on these dates, but she's constantly thinking, is this it? Is this the absolute best I can do? She feels like she's settling if she picks a guy who is just, nice and stable. She even talked about the marriage contract as a liquidity trap.
A liquidity trap. That's a fascinating economic term to apply.
Yeah, she feels like she's holding this asset, her commitment, her future, and she's terrified to invest it because the market just feels so volatile, and she thinks a better option is always just one more swipe away.
Elena's case is so interesting because it really brings in the hard, cold economics of the biological clock. And I know that term can sound cliche or even a bit taboo.
It does a little bit.
But we have a paper here from Columbia University. It's titled Pricing the Biological Clock. And it actually puts real numbers on this. It quantifies it.
Pricing it, you mean like in actual dollars?
In actual dollars.
Yeah.
It treats what economists call reproductive capital, which is basically a proxy for fertility and youth, as a depreciating asset. And it analyzes the trade-off that women, particularly ambitious women, face between investing in their human capital, their career, their education, and their reproductive capital.
Yeah. Elena spent her entire 20s building up her human capital.
Right. She went to grad school, she worked 60-hour weeks, she climbed that corporate ladder, she absolutely maximized her human capital. But that process took time. And time is the one thing that depletes reproductive capital.
So now she's 34, she has a very high income, but her fecundity, I guess is the technical term, is lower than it was at 24.
Correct. And this is where the paper gets quite controversial, but it's statistically rigorous. They analyzed thousands and thousands of online dating interactions to find what they call the indifference curve. The indifference curve. Basically, they asked, how much extra money does a woman need to earn to compensate for being 1 year older in the eyes of an average male suitor?
I'm almost afraid to ask this.
Yeah. The experimental finding was approximately $7,000 per year.
Whoa, $7,000. So you're telling me that if she's, say, 5 years older than her competition, she needs to be making $35,000 more per year just to break even in terms of attractiveness.
According to the revealed preferences in this particular study, yes, that's what the data showed.
Dang, I mean, do men really care about a woman's income that much? I always thought the stereotype was that guys don't care about a woman's career.
And that's the paradox. Right. The study suggests that men don't prioritize income as a primary attractive trait, but it can act as a compensation factor for other traits. But here's the real kicker for someone like Elena. It's a phenomenon called non-monotonic matching.
Non-monotonic matching. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one like I'm 5.
Okay. In a monotonic world, the rich marry the rich. The doctor marries the lawyer. The CEO marries the CEO.
The power couple.
Yeah.
Like Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Exactly. That's called assortative mating. But the data shows that when a woman's career investments, her human capital yield relatively small gains in household income compared to the loss of fertility, the matching pattern becomes non-monotonic.
I'm still not quite following.
It means that high-earning men, the very guys Elena wants to date, often opt out of the power couple dynamic entirely.
Why? Is it because they already have money?
It's the law of diminishing marginal utility of income. If I'm a guy making, say, $500,000 a year, does my wife also making $200,000 really change my day-to-day lifestyle? Not that much. But her age, that dramatically changes my potential reproductive future. So these high-value men often skip over the high-earning, slightly older women and choose to pair with younger, often lower-earning partners who have a higher stock of reproductive capital.
So Elena is standing there with her VP title and her fancy condo, thinking these are her biggest assets in the dating market. But the men she wants are actually looking at those assets and sort of shrugging.
It's worse than shrugging. They might even view them as liabilities if they signal a lack of time or a reduced focus on family. This is the value mismatch. Elena has spent years specializing in a currency career success that the specific market she wants to buy into doesn't actually value that highly.
Wow. It's like she climbed the entire mountain, got to the very top, and then realized the party she wanted to go to was at the bottom the whole time.
And this ties directly into the larger societal decline of the provider role for men. We have to look at the walk of Gary Becker here. He was a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He modeled traditional marriage as a trade based on specialization.
This is the old 1950s model, right?
Yes. The husband specializes in market work. He goes out and makes the money. The wife specializes in home production, raising the kids, running the household. In that model, there were massive gains from trade. They needed each other to have a functional life. A man needed a wife to manage his home. A woman needed a husband to fund her life.
But Elena doesn't need anyone to fund her life. She funds her own.
The state, through welfare, and the market, through female employment, have largely replaced the male provider role. This is the shift to the involved father or autonomous man model. Men are no longer strictly necessary for financial survival.
Which, on the face of it, is a great thing for equality and female empowerment.
It is a fantastic thing for equality, but it is a very, very complicated thing for the mating market. It reduces the liquidity of the traditional marriage contract. Elena doesn't need a man, but she still often wants a partner who is at or above her in status and income. That's the old concept of hypergamy.
So she's looking for a unicorn. Mm-hmm. She needs a man who earns more than her, which is already a small pool of men. He has to want an older, high-earning partner, which is an even smaller pool, and she has to find him physically attractive and have chemistry.
Yeah.
The odds are just astronomical.
It creates her liquidity trap. She has plenty of assets to offer, but she can't seem to sell them in the market she's in. And that digital mirror of the dating app just makes everything worse.
So?
Because it constantly shows her profiles of these top-tier men, the investment bankers, the surgeons, and she matches with them occasionally, maybe for a casual date or a hookup.
So in her mind, she thinks, I can get this guy.
But what she's getting is his attention, not his commitment. And the app's interface is designed to blur the line between those two things until they seem like the same thing.
It's the illusion of liquidity. Mm. She thinks the market is hot and everyone's trading, but in reality, nobody's actually buying for the long term. So we've got Arthur, who can't even get in the front door of the club. We've got Elena, who's in the VIP section but can't close a deal because the prices are all wrong. And this leads us to the third story, which I have to be honest, I found the most chilling, but also, in a strange way, the most rational. Let's talk about Hiroki. He's in Tokyo.
Ah, Hiroki, the rational withdrawer.
Right. So Hiroki is young, he's employed, seems like a decent guy, but he has made a conscious decision to just quiet quit dating entirely. He calls it rational withdrawal. He's not an incel. He's not particularly angry or hateful. He's just done.
He's opted out.
He's opted out. He views being single as a risk management strategy. He says the adverse selection in the dating pool is just too high.
This is straight out of George Akerlof's Market for Lemons paper. It's another Nobel Prize-winning economic theory, but it was originally about used cars.
Okay, I know the basic concept. If you go to buy a used car, you have no idea if it's a gem or if it's a total piece of junk, a lemon.
Right. There's what's called information asymmetry. The seller knows the car's true condition, but the buyer doesn't. So the buyer, to protect himself from getting ripped off, refuses to pay a high price for any used car.
Because he has to assume it might be junk.
Exactly. But because buyers won't pay high prices, the sellers of the good cars, the peaches, pull them from the market. Why would you sell a perfect car for a lemon price? So the good cars vanish. This leaves only the lemons. The average quality of cars on the market drops. Buyers react by lowering their offer prices even more. More sellers of decent cars leave. It's a death spiral until the entire market collapses.
So how do you apply that to Tinder?
Hiroki looks at the app. He sees massive information asymmetry. Is this profile real? Is this person emotionally stable? Is she actually looking for a long-term relationship? Or is she just looking for Instagram followers? Is she a bot? Is she just looking for a free meal tonight? He has no way of knowing.
So like the car buyer, he assumes the worst case scenario.
He assumes adverse selection. He assumes that any truly high-quality, serious woman would have already found a partner through other means and left the app. Therefore, anyone who is still on the app after a certain age must be a lemon in the purely economic sense of the word.
Which, that is a really harsh and cynical assumption to make.
It's incredibly harsh. But from a purely rational economic standpoint, is it illogical? If the search costs, the time, the money, the emotional energy he spends on dates that go nowhere outweighs the statistical probability of finding a peach, the most rational move is to simply exit the market.
He's cutting his losses before he even invests. The only winning move is not to play.
Exactly. And this is compounded by another problem from game theory, which is the difficulty of signaling.
Okay, this is the virtual rose experiment you flagged in the research.
Yes. Signaling theory asks a simple question. In a noisy market, how do you prove that you are a serious, high-quality actor? In the animal kingdom, they use costly signals. A peacock's giant tail is metabolically expensive to grow, and it makes him easier for predators to catch. The very fact that he can survive despite this handicap is an honest, costly signal that he has great genes.
Okay, so what's the costly signal on an app like Bumble?
There isn't one. Swiping rate is free. It costs $0 and 0 calories. Sending a hey message is free. It's all what economists call cheap talk.
So me swiping right on someone means absolutely nothing, because I could have just swiped right on 500 other people in the last 10 minutes while sitting on the toilet.
Correct. But this study looked at what happens when you introduce a scarce or costly signal. They created a virtual rose feature, something that costs a few dollars to send, or you only get one per week. And they found that sending that rose increased the rate of acceptance by 37%.
Because it's proof of skin in the game. It says, I spent $5 on this single interaction. I'm not just spamming everyone.
It helps resolve the information asymmetry. But the apps themselves, their business model, they don't want this. They want friction-free, high-volume engagement. They want you swiping 1,000 times a day. So they've created an environment of pure cheap talk where a high-intent guy like Hiroki cannot distinguish himself from the low-intent spammers.
So Hiroki's in a crowded room shouting, I am a serious long-term partner. But he's standing next to 1,000 other guys shouting the exact same thing just to get laid. And he realizes nobody can tell the difference.
So he turns around and walks out of the room.
And there's an even darker side to this withdrawal too, isn't there? We've got this paper here with a very provocative title, Misogynists Have Feelings Too.
Yeah, that title is definitely designed to get clicks, but the actual content is a fascinating analysis of effective economics. It looks at the logic of online communities like the Red Pill, not from a political or moral standpoint, but from a purely economic one.
This is where you get the beta bucks versus alpha fucks terminology.
And look, we don't have to agree with their worldview at all to dissect their economic logic. They view a committed relationship as a potential hostile takeover of a man's resources and emotional energy. They believe that if they open up emotionally, they are demonstrating a vulnerability that will be exploited.
So they see women as, what, rent seekers.
Yeah.
Trying to extract the tax from them.
Yes. They make a sharp distinction between being a long-term provider, providing beta bucks, and being a short-term, high-status genetic choice, alpha fucks. So men like Hiroki, or perhaps more radicalized versions of him, adopt a strategy of emotional choking. They refuse to provide emotional labor or financial resources.
It's a defensive crouch. A preemptive strike.
It is. They reframe singlehood not as a failure, but as a successful defense against what they perceive as a catastrophic loss down the line.
God, it's all so cold. It's so actuarial. I have calculated the potential for heartbreak and financial loss, and I've concluded the ROI on love is negative.
But when you look at the data, the divorce rates, the sexual Gini coefficient, the lemon market dynamics of the apps, well, the conclusion might be bleak. Can you honestly say the calculation itself is entirely irrational?
That is the really scary question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have Arthur, who's been totally erased by the algorithm. We have Elena, who's been priced out of the market by the biological clock and hyperinflated expectations. And we have Hiroki, who's quit the game entirely because he thinks the table is rigged. When you put those three characters together in the same ecosystem, what do you get?
You get what the research calls a catastrophic equilibrium.
That sounds like a complete system collapse.
It is a market failure, a total market failure for the participants. But, and this is the absolute most crucial part to understand, it is a massive runaway success for the platform owners.
Right. This is the revenue model problem.
Exactly. We have a thesis here that breaks down the business incentives of a company like IAC, that's Interactive Corp. They're a monopoly. They own Tinder, Hinge, Match.com, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, almost all of them.
So the attention oligopoly isn't just the hot people on the app. It's the corporate entity that owns the whole playground.
Yes. And you have to ask yourself a very simple question. What is the primary business goal of Tinder? Is it to find you a wife?
No. If I find a wife, I delete the app. And so does she.
Exactly. A successful match is what they call customer churn. It is bad for business. Their key performance metric is engagement efficiency, not matching efficiency. Their goal is to keep you single.
They want me stuck in the loop, hopeful enough to keep swiping and maybe buy some premium features, but single enough to come back tomorrow and do it all again.
It's a casino. The casino doesn't want you to hit the jackpot on your first pull and walk out a millionaire. They want you to win just enough small pots to keep you sitting at that slot machine, pulling the lever over and over and over again.
And this leads to that digital mirror effect you mentioned earlier, the concept of virtual ovulation.
It's such a powerful metaphor for what's happening. For women especially, the app provides this constant, unending stream of validation. Likes, matches, super likes. It neurologically mimics the biological signal of being in extremely high demand, like a constant state of peak ovulation.
So it's basically tricking their brain into thinking they have more options than they really do.
It fundamentally distorts self-perception. A median value individual looks into this digital mirror and sees a reflection that is artificially inflated by the algorithm's need to keep her engaged. So she thinks to herself, why would I ever settle for Arthur, the nice accountant, when I matched with a male model who surfs in Malibu yesterday?
Even if that male model was a bot or was just swiping right on everyone within 100 miles or was only in town for one night looking for a hookup.
The digital mirror lies. It creates this pervasive delusion of abundance, and this delusion leads to the brutal amputation of the long tail. The bottom 80% of men, the Arthurs of the world, they cease to exist as viable options because women are gazing at a mirage of the top 1%.
So the apps are literally mining our collective loneliness for subscription fees.
They are resource extraction machines, and the resource they're extracting is our hope.
This has been, I have to say, it's been a bit terrifying, but also incredibly clarifying. It explains so much of the low-level ambient frustration and confusion that I see all around me. I feel like I finally understand why my friend Elias looks so profoundly tired. He's not fighting a people problem, he's fighting a math problem.
It is. And nature is indifferent to your plea for fairness. And the algorithm is indifferent to your happiness. It is designed to optimize for clicks, not for grandkids.
We have built a system that models human intimacy with the same cold efficiency used to trade stocks or optimize ad clicks. The system is not responsible for your reproduction. Nature is indifferent to your plea for fairness. Your only remaining dignity stems from a clear, structural understanding of a game whose rules guarantee most players will lose. The final red pill is this. Your sovereignty begins where your hope for systemic fairness ends.
That's the reality of the situation. You have to understand the machine, understand the math, before you can even begin to make a rational decision about whether to play against it or just to walk away and smash it.
Thank you so much for unpacking all of this with me. It's a lot to process, but I think it's a conversation that desperately needed to be had.
Pleasure.
And everyone listening, take a hard look at your dashboard. Look at the numbers and ask yourself a simple question. Are you playing the game, or is the game playing you?
See you next time.